National Weather Service in the Cincinnati tri-state area, KIH 42.
It's a sickening feeling not being able to win at home in the AFC Championship.
There it turns to rain.
Anytime we see the Bengals, for whatever reason, it always reminds me of that game.
You see, this is the approach of what we call a severe thunderstorm.
This storm is moving east and will affect Hamilton County until 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
Don't get caught out in this storm.
A mechanism to trigger the storm.
The Chiefs completed a perfect month of November last week with a double-digit victory over the Rams. And with the homestand of the season now underway, they'll look to maintain the top record in the AFC in a rematch against a familiar foe in the Cincinnati Bengals. We are 2 hours from kickoff. You've waited all week for this very moment. It's finally here. It is time for football in Chiefs Kingdom. Let's do this. My name is Matt McMullen, joined by voice of the Chiefs, Mitch Holthus. This is Field Pass presented by StorageMart. And Mitch, we try to attack every week like the players and the coaches, right? Every game is the most important game. Never look too far ahead. But this particular game, now that we're here, we're pretty fired up about it.
Yeah, and Coach Reed has said, he said Monday night on the Chiefs Kingdom show that he's proud of this Chiefs team because they've been able to do exactly that. They have kept the focus of that week in front of them and seen it pay off to 9-2, the number one record in the AFC. Although, here are the Bengals. The Bengals have became a team to the rallying cry, really, of the whole offseason for Kansas City.
Now, it's only week 13. This isn't a playoff game. And sure, the guys are fired up about this game because of what happened last year. But I think it's not about revenge, really. It's about how the Chiefs dealt with the loss last year. It's really a testament to them how they dealt with it. There's a multitude of ways they could have handled the loss last year. I mean, they could have hung their heads. They could have pointed fingers. They didn't do any of that. They learned from it. And I really believe the 9-2 start this season is because of that self-reflection that happened late last year.
I think it's totally the reason, because just look at what happened tangibly. The fact that Patrick Mahomes had his own OTAs. Chris Jones came back in the best shape of his life. He's never had this good of offseason in his NFL career. Same with Frank Clark. The addition of the young players. But all of that, I think, was the residue of losing in the AFC Championship game to the Bengals. Again, not as trying to exact some kind of revenge. It was, and here's a spoiler alert, listen to the open of the radio broadcast at 3:07, because I talk about rewiring, I talk about electricians, I talk about electricity, and the Chiefs infused their own man-made electricity using that loss to reinvent themselves, scheme-wise, individually, and that's why this Chiefs team is 9-2.
Well, and Patrick Mahomes is a great example of that, right? There's a bunch of ways he could have handled that loss as well. Could have made excuses or pointed fingers. Didn't do any of that. He did two things. First of all, he owned it and took responsibility for it. And the second thing is he learned from it and became better because of it. And we're seeing that so far this season. Through 12 weeks this year, he leads the NFL in passing yards by 400 and passing touchdowns by 6. He's racked up 6 consecutive 300-yard games. That's the longest streak by any quarterback in the NFL since Patrick Mahomes back in 2020. You're living right whenever you're just matching and breaking your own records, and that's Patrick Mahomes right now. Entering this week, no other quarterback in the NFL even had 6 300-yard games. He is 6 in a row, so he's been incredible this season. Yeah, we expect this from him, but I truly believe the way he handled that loss is why he's been so good this season.
If he gets 300 yards passing today, you mentioned it, he'll be the only quarterback in NFL history to do it twice within the span of a same season. It's been done, but it's gone from different seasons. You can either react to a loss like the Bengals game in the AFC one of two ways. There's no neutral reaction to that. You either the so-called hangover and it affects your whole season negatively or positively. So I think we've stated that he has. Let me just give you one tangible example here. They talked about, the Bengals dropped 8 guys, 10 times out of 22 dropbacks in the second half. The Chiefs this year have faced 68 times where teams have dropped 8 men into coverage on dropbacks in 11 weeks. Patrick Mahomes has 77% completion percentage against that defense with 6 touchdown passes. It's been personnel, guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, Justin Watson, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. But it's also been Patrick Mahomes reinventing himself. If the 5-yard hitch is there, take it. And if it's Juju Smith-Schuster, he may go for 40 more, like the Bills game. So, yes, it's the most underrated story, I think, of the Chiefs' 2022 season from a national standpoint, is the way that the Chiefs team reinvented themselves and rewired themselves after that Bengals loss.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because the 10,000-foot view version of this game from like the national media is, hey, it's a rematch of Patrick Mahomes and this Bengals defense. But the Bengals defense, is relatively unchanged. The Chiefs offense looks completely different than what the Bengals saw last year in January. And for some of the reasons you laid out, they're maybe better equipped to handle the Bengals defensively in this game because of their offensive personnel additions this year.
Yeah, their offensive line, when you look at what they've added, they've spent money on Alex Kapp at right guard, La'el Collins from the Cowboys at right tackle. They go get Ted Karras at center. So they invested a lot of money. That's where the Bengals are different. Otherwise, they look the same as January. For the Chiefs, though, think of the top 4 receivers. We just mentioned them, basically. Throw in Sky Moore. None of those guys were there in January. And nobody's talked about that, I don't think. And then with what the Chiefs did with this rookie class as well, I mean, the Bengals are going to see a whole bunch of guys going, wait a minute, that was only 11 months ago, and I don't remember seeing this guy. Yeah,
it's really on multiple fronts, too. It's in the passing game, for one thing, as you mentioned. The Chiefs have a variety of pass catchers now on this team who can all beat you. 10 different guys on this offense have caught a touchdown for this team. The NFL record is 13. The Chiefs have 6 games to go here. They're going to get that record, fingers crossed at least. 12
Prediction, they're going to add two today.
All right, well, there you go.
I'm just feeling that. Two more will be added today.
12 different guys have a catch of at least 20 or more yards this season, and the underneath passing game has been a well-oiled machine this year for the Chiefs, especially when Juju Smith-Schuster is out there. That wasn't always the case last season. And in the running game, Isaiah Pacheco is playing some very good football right now. Over the last 3 weeks, he is the 5th most rushing yards in the NFL.
Well, let's go back to your 20-plus passing stat. 52 20-plus yard plays, number 1 in the NFL, 12 different guys. But think about that.
That's most in the NFL, by the way.
By the way, 12 different. But, okay, think Rojo last week, right? And Ronald Jones the second on the screen for 22 yards. That's a play that was not in the, at least to be executed like that in January because of that size of running back and the offensive line being able to execute screen plays better. But it's a 20-plus yard play. So the Chiefs are just doing it differently. They're getting the same production, hopefully better in the red zone this week because they've been good all year long. This team's decent in the red zone defensively, but it's a different recipe. They're just getting to the same cuisine.
Yeah, spreading the football around in the passing game and this running game have been so significant for this team this year. And you mentioned it earlier, the common theme for the Bengals against the Chiefs last year was their defensive scheme, right? It was dropping 8 into coverage and only rushing 3. Well, guess what? If the underneath passing game is working, and if you're running the football effectively with Isaiah Pacheco, that's not going to work here in this game. So hopefully the Chiefs are able to keep that up here in this one. It also makes life easier for Patrick Mahomes in the passing game whenever Isaiah Pacheco is running the football effectively. Now, speaking of the passing game, I want to ask you about Joe Burrow and this Bengals passing game because it's very good, one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. Burrow bounced back from a very slow start this season to put together another strong year. Actually, since Week 6, he's tied with Patrick Mahomes for the most touchdown passes in the NFL with 14. I'm curious your thoughts on Burrow heading into this one.
Really interesting. People forget, though, he had an appendectomy back at the beginning of training camp, which basically put him – his training camp was September in many ways, or at least the first couple of weeks. The thing that is just still perplexing about Joe Burrow is he has been sacked since his ACL injury in 2020, December. About this time in 2020, he has been sacked 103 times.
Wow.
51 times last year, 19 in the playoffs. Chiefs only got him once, and 33 times this year. He's like a sparring partner for Floyd Mayweather. He keeps getting hit, and yet he's been productive. 23 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He gets Jamar Chase back, who went for 266 on this field a year ago in the regular season. But Joe Burrow, to me, is a very interesting story. But I do know this, in 29 years in this league, if you keep getting hit that much, it does take an effect on you at some point.
Yeah, when he's able to get rid of the football, though, does have a lot of weapons. You mentioned Jamar Chase, one of the best receivers in the NFL. We'll know officially if he's going to play or not when the inactive list come out in a few minutes, but probably going to play. I want to ask you about a different guy, though, in this passing attack, and that's T. Higgins. Kind of a sneaky superstar sort of season from T. Higgins this year. Great game last week against Tennessee. A very physical victory for them over the Titans. And Higgins right now, he leads this team in catches and receptions, or catches and receiving yards. He has 57 grabs for 826 yards so far this season. And a 57-yard touchdown a career, so he can get big plays as well. Don't forget, in looking at my boards here, he had over 100 yards receiving in the AFC Championship game. Jamar Chase gets a lot of the love and should with that 4.15 speed or whatever he's got. And even Tyler Boyd is a really good compliment. And then Hayden Hurst at tight end was a good pickup for them. But T. Higgins, to me, is the reason they're 7-4 right now. He has had a way better year than anybody's given him credit for. Shout out to Lucas for holding up your boards over here. Yeah, Lucas Boyd, man, his first NFL game. Yeah. And he's awesome, man. He's just terrific. Yeah, it's the little things. But I want to ask you once again about this offensive line for Cincinnati. You briefly touched on it a moment ago. Playmakers everywhere for Burrow and the Bengals, but it doesn't matter much if you don't have time to get rid of the football. And he's been sacked 33 times this season. That's the third most of any quarterback in the NFL. They've gotten better over the course of the season, but still, it's a great opportunity here today for the Chiefs' defensive line and defense in general, which has 35 sacks this year, already more than they had in all of last season. Got to make sure they make good on that opportunity here today. And Jonah Williams, the left tackle, he's the one holdover from January, right? The other four are new because they've got Wolfson, who's a rookie at left guard. But Jonah Williams has given up more sacks than any player in the National Football League at left tackle. He's got 7 sacks. So he's, if you get him off the edge. But it's been more than just Chris Jones, too, on this defensive front. And Carlos Dunlap can set an NFL record, or at least tie an NFL record. If he gets a sack, remember, this is his old teammates. He played 10 years in this facility. If he gets a sack, he will have a sack against all 32 teams. And that's only been done by 2 other players in NFL history. So come on, Los, go get one against your old teammates. We talked a lot about the Chiefs' offense earlier and how they're maybe better equipped to handle the Bengals here in this one. I think it's the same story for the defense. This defense looks entirely different than what the Bengals saw last year. These Bengals do fight, though. We know that about them. It's in their DNA. We saw it last season in those losses. We've seen it this season. They fought back from a slow start to be right in the thick of the playoff hunt. And for more on these Bengals and how they fight until the end, I caught up with Tracy Wolfson from CBS Sports earlier this week. All right, we're joined now by Tracy Wolfson from CBS Sports. She'll be on the sidelines for today's game. And Tracy, this Bengals team, they really have it in their DNA, both on a micro and macro level, that they're going to hang in there and fight until the end. We saw that last year in our matchups against them, and we've seen it overall this season because they got off to a pretty slow start, and yet they fought back to be right in the middle of the playoff chase here. How do you explain the Bengals' ability to fight back from that slow start this season to be right in the thick of things right now?
Well, you're exactly correct in the sense that they are fighters. And the Chiefs had said that multiple times, having faced them and losing the last 2 times to them. Is they are fighters. They come with confidence. They never believe they're out. It stems from Joe Burrow, and it also just goes across all the coaches and the players out there. I think they started out slow because, one, Joe Burrow was, he had the appendectomy. He was a little slow in recovering. He wasn't out there during preseason much. And then they had a new offensive line, basically, that, was really, exposed last year, was able to hang in and get them to a Super Bowl, which is pretty crazy to think. But then they didn't have time to gel yet. And this is an offensive line that has been consistent all year long. If I'm correct, they've had the same starting 5 since the beginning of the season with no injuries, throwing guys in and out. And that is huge. So you put that combination, and speaking to Steve Spagnuolo yesterday, he basically said, I said to him, they're basically the same team that we saw last year, except that offensive line. And they've got all the weapons they have. They have the running backs situation, and they've got Joe Burrow. And then you put a better offensive line in front of him, and that's why they're peaking at the right time. And then add in that confidence level, and they're playing really good football right now when it counts.
Yeah, and Burrow is certainly at the core of that, having another really nice season. I want to ask you about the quarterback matchup here, and I generally do this whenever we play the Bills as well, because these are young players right now, but still, when you're looking at the future of the league, how special is it when Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow go up against one another, when you're looking at how good these guys probably are going to be when we look back at this game years from now?
Yeah, I think we felt that last year, and we certainly are feeling it going in. And you're hearing all the Peyton Manning and Tom Brady comparisons, and I covered so many of those matchups. But you're right, because you can also say that when they play the Bills, and you're talking Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, which is really exciting because it's not just two guys that you're going to be comparing. You've got three right there, and several more coming up in these young quarterbacks. So it's exciting. I think you're going to go back and you're going to look back at these games and realize what you witnessed in the early stages. And it's just going to get better and better every time these two teams meet. And certainly we're going to see it, on the biggest of stage this Sunday on a national audience at 4:25. And then who knows what happens down the road in the playoffs. And we might see it once again there.
Yeah, I think the NFL is certainly in good hands moving forward with all these great young quarterbacks. I think I speak for Chiefs Kingdom, though, when we hope Patrick Mahomes is the one smiling after this particular game. But it should be a lot of fun and a lot of great matchups here in the future against these Bengals. Tracy, awesome stuff. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we just got the inactives for today's game early today, like 5 minutes early today. I had all this
Everything's
stuff planned.
early today.
Yeah, but we got the inactives. So an interesting inactive segment because there's a lot of names to keep an eye on here. So for the Chiefs, here's what we were watching coming in. We knew Kadarius Toney was not going to play in this game. He is out with a hamstring injury. Hopefully we get Kadarius back next week, but that's no news. We knew that on Friday. A couple of late additions to the injury report, though, that are significant. So Joe Toney, I'm presuming the ankle injury that kept him out of the game last week was re-aggravated, and he was listed as questionable as of yesterday entering today's game. He is not going to play here today. Joe Toney is inactive in today's game, so no Joe Toney. Hopefully we get him back next week. There was another late addition to the injury report this morning. It was Frank Clark with an illness. He was listed as questionable coming in. Frank is active. So Frank is active in this game. Joe Toney is not. Kadarius Toney obviously is not. Safety Deion Bush with an elbow injury. He was questionable coming in. He is inactive in this game. So no Deion Bush. There is some good news, though. Jerick McKinnon had the hamstring injury earlier this week. Was limited in practice for a few days. He's good to go. He has no injury designation. And also safety Juan Thornhill missed last week's game with a calf injury. He is active in this game as well. But the big news, Frank Clark is active. Joe Toney is not.
Yeah, let's talk about what the Toney injury means, because I really thought for the 2 straight weeks, I was just the general feeling he's going to go. So they must have tried it out here again this morning. That's 2 weeks in a row after he played 107 straight games. But here's the factor, Matt, because Allegretti's so good to come in as an extra blocker. We'll bring in 6 linemen many times, like all teams do in this league. But now he's out of that. Now he goes into the role where he's got to do it. And many times you'll have DJ Reader staring at him in the face. So Allegretti's got to do it for a second consecutive week. He is 11-0 as a starter, though, Nick Allegretti. But it takes your 6th man out of the equation. That's where it's effective, or it can be effective there for the Bengals in many ways. And then Bush, he's your special teams 4-core guy. So guys like Cornell Powell, Zane Anderson, who were elevated from the practice squad, are going to have to be effective in this game.
Now, looking at the Bengals, they had some big names, obviously, on their injury report. Of course, Jamar Chase with that hip injury hasn't played in 4 games. He's active here today, as expected. We thought he would be. He was questionable coming in, but practiced all week. So Jamar Chase is active in this game. Joe Mixon, though, is not. And he was in concussion protocol, missed last week's game. Kind of assumed he'd be good to go for this game. But Joe Mixon, he is not active in this game. So no Joe Mixon for the Bengals. A couple other guys we were watching. DJ Reader, their extraordinary defensive tackle, he had an ankle injury that was keeping him out of practice a little bit this week. He was limited. He returned to the field a few weeks ago after missing several weeks with a knee injury. This ankle thing I think is new, but he's good to go. He's active in this game. And then linebacker Logan Wilson, he popped up on the injury report on Friday with an illness and was questionable coming in. He is active in this game. But the really big news, Jamar Chase, he's active. Joe Mixon is not.
Yeah, 2 weeks in the concussion protocol, and I love it when the league takes such precaution with concussions, right? But when it's 2 weeks, then you start to think about the future for Mixon going into the next several weeks and going into the playoffs because of that. That's 2 weeks in concussion protocol. Not all concussions are the same, right? But here's the ripple effect of the Mixon injury, much like the Joe Toney injury for Kansas City. You got to think here beyond the obvious. If it puts Allegretti in that left guard spot, but it takes Allegretti out of the 6th man role. Mixon, when they have the Samaje Perine Mixon tag team thing going on, That's where they're very effective. Remember, Samaje Perine's 41-yard catch and run for a touchdown flipped the AFC Championship game last year at GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium. Now Perine's got to be the guy. That means it's Travion Williams, a rookie, who has to be the tag team guy, because it's not going to be Perine all day long, or Evans, who's really a kick returner. So there's a ripple effect here for both the Chiefs with the Tooney injury and with the Bengals with the Mixon injury.
Yeah, they do get Chase back, though, and they're getting healthier. They're fired up for this game. But you know what? So are the Chiefs. The Chiefs are fired up for this one as well. Kansas City bounced back from a devastating loss in the AFC title game last year to start 9-2 this season. And who better to get the 10th victory of the year against than the Cincinnati Bengals? For Mitch Holthus, I'm Matt McMullen. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Let's go get a victory.